Hi family, welcome back to ladensercrochets. If you're new to the channel, you're welcome. Kindly subscribe and join the family. This is part 2 of the crochet granny square patchwork sweater with a hood, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to do the ribbons on the sleeves, that is on the wrist, on the waist and on the hood. If you've not created this sweater yet, I'm going to leave a link in the description box on how to connect the squares to come up with the sweater, and also a link on how to make the square, because there's a tutorial for how to make the square and another tutorial on how to connect the squares to get to the sweater. Once you've made the squares and connected them, then we get to the ribbon. As you can see, I've already done one of the ribbons on the wrist, and I'll be doing the other wrist the same exact way, but I'll be working my illustration with the waist ribbon. So we're going to determine one of the corners at the point where we've connected the back and the front panel, and then we're going to start with a slip knot and reconnect the yarn at that point. So I'll just turn my work so that we are on the lower part of the sweater, that is the waist part of the sweater, and at one of the corners we're going to reconnect the yarn with a slip stitch. First 10, then we're going to chain 10 at that point. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Once we get to the 10 chains, we're going to hold the 10th chain and chain one more, insert the hook into the 10th chain and pull up a loop, then pull it through the loop that was in the hook to complete a slip stitch. Go into the next chain and do a slip stitch. Into the third chain, we do a third slip stitch. Into the fourth chain, we're going to do a fourth slip stitch, then another slip stitch into the fifth, into the sixth, into the seventh. We also do a slip stitch, then we also do it on the 8th chain, on the 9th chain, and on the 10th chain. And in total we're going to have 10 slip stitches. Then we're going to go into the next corner of the other square right there and do a slip stitch. Then we're going to do a slip stitch onto the double crochet that follows. So 2 slip stitches on the sweater, then we turn. When we turn, we're going to begin on the 10th slip stitch that we've done from the previous row. Then we're going to work in the back loop. So insert your hook into the back loop of that slip stitch, grab your yarn and do a slip stitch. Then we're going to do 1 slip stitch into the next 8 for a total of 9. So that's 2, 3, then we're going to have 4, 5. As you can see, we are working in the back loops. 6, then we have 7, we have 8 and 9 slip stitches. When we come to this end, we're going to work the both loops. Instead of working the back loop, we're going to work the 2 loops in the 10th stitch. So in those 2 loops, we're going to work a slip stitch. So that's the end of row 2. We're only going to be working the 2 loops on that end. The others will always get one on the back loop. So chain 1 and turn, begin in the back loop of the first stitch and work a slip stitch. Then we work into the next back loop, and we're going to work for a total of 10 slip stitches, 1 in each of the back loops of the stitches. So that's 2, 3, then we're going to have 4, then 5, then we're going to continue up to 10. So that's 5, we have 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Then we're going to work in the next double crochet stitch, slip stitch, then slip stitch again into the next double crochet and turn. When we turn, we begin from the point where we had our last our last slip stitch, the 10th slip stitch. In the back loop, we work a slip stitch. Then we're going to work a total of 9 slip stitches, so that in the last slip stitch, we're going to work in the back loop. So this is row 4 of our ribbon, and we're going to be working the 2 loops at the end of each of the even rows. So that is row 2, row 4, row 6, and so on. So in the both loops, do a slip stitch, chain 1, and turn to begin row 5. Then we're going to work the back loop of the first stitch in row 5, and we're going to place a slip stitch into each of the other back loops. So 10 stitches in the back loop to get back to the main sweater. This is row 5, so keep going with a slip stitch in the back loop of each of those stitches. The last one. Then after that, we're going to work a slip stitch. So right here, I've done a total of 5 rows, and I'm just going to do a slip stitch into the next double crochet. So we're going to work 1 slip stitch, then a second slip stitch, and a third slip stitch. So you are doing only 2, but now we've done 3. That's like a reduction. We are reducing the stitches so that we have a snatched waistline. Then you're going to mark the point where you've done the reduction and turn. When you turn, begin on the 10th slip stitch that you did and work in the back loop of the next 9 stitches. Then in the last one, we're going to work the both loops, because this is row 6, which is an even row. I'm coming to the end of that row, and I'm just working the last stitch in the both loops, then chain 1 and turn. After we turn, we're going to begin row 7, and in row 7 we're going to work a slip stitch into the back loop of each of the 10 stitches. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. When we get to this side, we're going to slip stitch twice. So we're going to have a slip stitch into the next double crochet and onto the next one, and then turn. When we turn, we're going to work in the back loop of the next 10 stitches, the next 9. Then in the 10th, this is row 8, and therefore at the end of row 8, we're going to work the both loops. Work those 2 loops at the end of the row. Chain 1 and turn to begin row 9. Begin in the back loop and work to the end. Once you get to the end, you're going to do 2 slip stitches, 1 in the next 2 double crochets, then turn. We are beginning row 10 in the last stitch, the 10th stitch that we've done previously, and then we're going to work a total of 9 slip stitches in the back loops. And then when we get to the last stitch, we're going to work the both loops of row 10. So get to the end and work the 2 loops, chain 1 and turn to begin row 11. Then we're going to work 1 slip stitch into each of the back loops in row 11. So let me work my slip stitches until I get to the last one, making sure that I'm working only in the back loops. Now when we get to the end of row 11, we've done a total of 5 stitches, 6, sorry, we've done a total of 6 rows. So as we begin row 12, we're going to slip stitch 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to move our stitch marker to that point so that we know how many rows we're going to do in between the stitch marker and the next reduction. So move it to the next double crochet, to the last double crochet where you've done the slip stitch, and turn to begin row 12. So when you turn, we're going to work row 12, then we'll work row 13, row 14, we'll work row 15. As we begin row 16, we're going to work another reduction. Then we're going to work row 17, row 16, row 17, row 18, row 19. As we begin row 20, we work another reduction. So we're working a reduction after every 4 rows, and we're going to do that until we get to the end of, or until we work all the way around the waistline of our sweater. So now keep going with the rows. Make sure that you work both loops at the end of every even row. Then keep going all the way around, and I'll meet you at the end of, once I've placed my ribbon all the way around the waistline. As you can see, I've worked my ribbon all the way around, and I only have a few stitches remaining. So I'm just going to do the slip stitch and a second slip stitch and turn. Then I'll keep working the rows in the back loops. So this is an even row, and I'm working a total of 9 slip stitches in the back loops. Then when I get to the 10th, I'll do both loops. So I'm in the 9th, in the 10th, both loops, chain 1 and turn to begin the next row. And I've already done 4 stitches, so I'm in the reduction row. So when I come to the end of this row, after working my 10 slip stitches, I'll be doing a reduction. So let me continue with the slip stitches and then reduce at the end. So just doing the slip stitches right there. Then we're going to do 3 slip stitches, 1, 2, and 3. Then turn. When we turn, we're going to do a slip stitch into the 10th slip stitch that we've done from the previous row, a slip stitch into all the other stitches till we have 1 stitch remaining in the back loops, that is. Then the last stitch goes into the both loops, chain 1, and as you can see, that was, it's not the last stitch. So I'm going to do a slip stitch, 1 into each of the stitches for a total of 10 till I get to the end of this row. So now let me keep going to the end of the row, and then when I get to the end, I'm going to do a slip stitch into that gap where I started, then chain 1 and cut off the yarn. So I'll get my pair of scissors, I'll cut the yarn, leaving an end that I'm going to use to connect the two edges. I've left a very short end, by the way. That was a mistake. Make sure that you leave a long one. So then you're going to turn your work to the wrong side because you want to connect the two ends of the ribbon, the first row with the last row that you've done. So you want to make sure that you're doing that from the wrong side of your sweater. So like so. Get your darning needle. Like I've mentioned, I've cut my yarn too short, so I might need to attach some more yarn in order for me to be able to connect. So we're going to start in the first stitch on one side and the first stitch on the other side. So on one side I'm going to work both loops, on the other side I'm going to work the front loop. So just connect the stitches, the first with the first, the second stitch with the second stitch. Then we have the third with the third stitch with the third stitch, the fourth with the fourth, and we're going to keep going till we've connected our 10 stitches. Right here I'm just adding some more yarn, so be very careful, don't cut your yarn too short because you're going to need a long one. Now I'm going to have an issue with the knots because sewing with a knot is a bit of a hassle, but it will have to do because my yarn is too short, that end that I've left there. So I'm just making the knot. Then I'm going to cut off those ends. Then I'll just put my darning needle back and keep going with the connection and just aligning the stitches and sewing all the way to the last stitch. In the last stitch we're going to do a knot right there, then we're going to weave in that end that has remained. I'm just having trouble with that knot that I made, but I'm working through it. So now we're just going to weave in the end into the stitches. So I'll just keep going all the way down, weaving in that end. Once I'm done attaching, connecting the ends of the ribbon, this is what I have. As you can see, it's looking on it. I love how a ribbon makes a sweater look way better than it was before. And this is the right side of my sweater. So now that I'm done with the ribbon on the waistline, I'll need to do a ribbon on the sleeve. And you're going to do it the same way we've done the ribbon on the waistline. So I'll not be showing you how to work this one because it's the same thing as the waistline. Now the ribbon that I'm going to show you how to make is the one on the hood. So you need to get your yarn and the hook and begin with a slip knot. And then we're going to begin from the left side of the hood on that stitch where we connected our hood. We're going to slip stitch there to reconnect the yarn. So do a slip stitch, and then we're going to chain. Now for the hood, we're not going to chain the same number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to work with 5 stitches for the hood. Block off the 5th and chain 1 more back into the 5th with a slip stitch, then a slip stitch into the 2nd stitch. So we're going to work a total of 5 slip stitches. So that is, this is the 2nd one. Then we're going to have the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. Then after that, we're going to get into the next stitch and do a slip stitch and a slip stitch into the next one and turn. Actually, this is basically the same thing we've done on the waistline. The only difference is that we were doing 10 stitches, but right now we are doing 5. So in the next stitch, in the next row, that is row 2, you're going to work in the back loop of the last slip stitch that we've done in row 1. So we're going to have a total of 5 slip stitches, 4 of them in the back loop. That's 2, 3, and 4. Then the 5th one will be in the both loops. And this is what we're going to be doing. Just 5 slip stitches, chain 1 and turn to begin row 3. In row 3, we're going to work all the back loops, 5 of them. So that is 1. And then we're going to have the second one, 2. Then we have 3, 4, and 5. Then in the double crochet that follows, slip stitch and another one, then turn to begin row 4. Begin in the back loop. So right there in the back loop of row 4 of the first stitch in row 4. Sorry about that. So you want to make sure that there are 5 stitches. Do a slip stitch into the second, into the third back loop, into the fourth back loop, then both loops in the 5th stitch. Chain 1 and turn to begin row 6. We work row 6. Actually, it's not row 6, row 5. We work 1 slip stitch into each of the back loops for a total of 5 stitches. Then now we're going to slip stitch 1, 2, and 3. We are repeating the same thing we did. Then we're going to mark. The same thing we did on the waistline is the same thing that we're going to do here. So we are working 3 slip stitches at the end of row 5 as we begin row 6. Then we're going to work 4 slip stitches in the back loops, and then the last one will be in the both loops. If you've understood how to work the ribbon on the waistline, then this one should be easy. And you're just going to go all the way around the hood, and I'll meet you at the end. Then we're going to connect and we'll be done. So let me keep going with my rows of slip stitches. Make sure that in every even row, you end with a slip stitch in the both loops. So that is in row 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. Make sure that the last stitch is in the both loops. After working all around, this is what we're going to have, and I've just done the ribbon for the last row. I've just completed and cut off the yarn at the end Then I've left a long end that I'm going to use to attach. Now you're going to count 5 stitches from this point: 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to connect this part of that ribbon to the 5th stitch. So the 5th stitch goes to that stitch that we've counted, and then we're just going to connect backwards. Just watch and learn at this point. My explanation may not be as good as you just watching and seeing what I'm doing. So I'm connecting the stitches, the 4th stitch with the 4th stitch, the 3rd with the 3rd, then we have the 2nd with the 2nd, all the way back to the end of that last row that I've done. So I'm just continuing with the attachment right there till I get to the last stitch. So now that part of the end is joined, and I want my ends to overlap, like the last row and the first row to overlap. One will be on the inside, the other one will be on the outside. So now on the other side, we're going to start from the first stitch, and then we're going to work from the upper part of the sweater. We're going to work 5 stitches. So I'm in the first stitch of the first row that I did, and I'm just going to attach for 5 stitches. So 1 stitch on the main part of the sweater, 1 stitch on the ribbon. Just align it like that and work the 5 stitches. You want to ensure that, like I've mentioned, you want to ensure that the last row of the ribbon overlaps with the first row of the ribbon, such that one of them is on the inside, the other one is on top. So keep going for those 5 stitches. Just make sure that you're aligning those stitches well so that you can get work that is neat. I think I'm in the 3rd stitch or the 4th. I'm in the 4th stitch. Then into the last one, just attach it and make a knot, then fasten, and then I'm going to take that end to the wrong side, and then I'll weave it inside the stitches on the wrong side of the sweater. So right here I'm just weaving in that end that has remained, and then I'll go on to weaving all the other ends. And at this point we are done with the sweater. I'll just work the other sleeve off camera. Like I mentioned, when you're working the sleeve, you're just going to work it the same way we worked the waistband. So at this point, after weaving this end, we'll have come to the end of our sweater. So this is what we're going to have on our hood, and it's perfect. And at this point we are done with the tutorial. So thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the tutorial. If you've enjoyed the tutorial, kindly leave a like, a comment, share. If you've enjoyed this tutorial so much that you want to leave a special gift, click on the thanks button and leave something to support me in creating this content. When you get to recreate this, kindly tag me on Instagram and I'll be reposting your work. See you in the next one.